Welcome to another book study of the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept, dealing in the area of politics. Again, our last part of politics. And we will be discussing people relations pertaining to politics. 0526.
Thank you. So getting started, I think I want to discuss this part of the code that I'm sure everyone here can relate to and is even possibly experiencing currently. So this is from page 246, where the code states, question, what should you expect to receive from your efforts to end racism and or produce justice? Answer. According to compensatory counter-racist logic, you should, for the most part, expect to receive 1, disapproval, 2, disappointment, 3, discomfort, 4, death. Explanation. A study of the past shows that all attempts at ending racism and or at producing justice has resulted in disapproval, disappointment, discomfort, and or death for great numbers of people who began to have a serious effect against those powerful people who are opposed to ending racism and or who are opposed to justice being produced. I thought that part was really necessary to be a part of the code, to just remind folks that this is not a pretty business to be in, the business of attempting to produce justice. And this part reminds me when I was still very confused about the system, but I had started reading a little bit of ISIS papers, and I had told my victim mother that I'm gonna try to end racism and white supremacy. And she got like worried for me. And then she says that she just expressed her concern for my life going into this business of attempting to produce justice. And now I know why. Clearly, we're not having a serious effect on producing justice due to the behavior of white people and non-white people. But potentially, if you begin to have a serious effect on people, I hope by that point we're able to produce justice and not get killed. But if I get killed, I won't be surprised and I won't be upset. Just part of the business. All 3 of these D's: disappointment, disapproval, discomfort, and death. I've experienced most of these every single day besides death, just living in a system of racism and white supremacy. So I might as well experience them while attempting to produce justice than to experience them while being confused. So that's another interesting thing. I think it's also interesting that no matter whether or not you're attempting to produce justice, you're still probably going to experience a lot of these Ds, including death in your victim units. Any thoughts on that passage? Have you understood, have you been experiencing any of these Ds in your efforts to produce justice or end racism and white supremacy?
I just want to add really briefly that our attempted mother made a similar comment about death today, about how you keep doing this work, you're gonna end up like George Floyd. So she still believes these type of things, and because of trying to replace the system of racism, white supremacy with justice, it's very possible. And it's really great that it's in a code book. And I think it's important to have it there. Malcolm X, MLK, all these people who attempted to solve the problem were murdered.
I was gonna say with the number two, the disappointment part. Probably feel very disappointed getting involved in this work because once you come into contact with learning the code and stuff, you want to go out and tell people about this, and little do you know, they're like, yeah, they ain't listening to the code and whatnot. But I think being persistent, as mentioned back in like the previous area of the book, being persistent, this book club has managed to acquire a few individuals that are willing to discuss the material in the code book and other books.
Thank you for your answers, sirs. Anyone else like to comment or answer?
Greetings, everyone. May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just wanted to thank everybody for letting me speak once again. But I'm floored by Neely Fuller's insights. And this chapter, this reading was just so significant. And I totally agree with what's been said already, that it's something with persistence will come through. I had never read through, I had access to it years back, but never really delved into it like I'm delving into it now. So I'm just so grateful because it's really harmonizing with I think a wave of becoming that society is reaching right now. I think in a lot of ways we're ready for something like this, but not the way it's written. Like you can't throw, for me anyway, you can't throw a book at people. People don't read. A lot of people don't read. So I'm big partial. I love how Silent Warrior has been pushing the idea of memes, and visuals are just so helpful. I don't know if anybody's seen some of the videos. Dan, I think you posted a video from, I forgot the name of it, but I think it's hip hop cartoons where they've taken just Neely Fuller and dramatized it with cartoons, and they're genius. They're fantastic, and just dropping those at people. I'm just so heartened by this work as I'm reading it because it's speaking to so much, and it's providing like an insight to racism that folks, I don't think they really get, but with a little tweaking, it could be palatable. Like I know in the reading this time, he was saying how, what do you say to someone who isn't necessarily practicing, or someone that's telling you that it's not worth it? You don't argue. It's such a good work that's telling us to work on ourselves. I'm just really impressed, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's thoughts. But he said not to push, these ideas on anybody, and that's what's up. It's an internal journey that we're on. How do we get ourselves to be embracing justice and vocally expressing truth and justice without even necessarily calling it white supremacy? Why use something that people would have trouble swallowing when we're not so concerned with the label as we are with the reality becoming more justice oriented. So whatever you want to call it tuna fish on rice, just get it done, and I love the idea of, I ended up changing my last name to Dapina, my dad's name, because my dad wasn't, of course, married to mom's, and he wasn't around, so I took his name. But my mom's maiden name is Smith. And Neely Fuller's like, well, if you've got Smith, if you're a common last name, connect with a white person whose name is Smith and be like, yo, you probably, had my people under you back in the day. You need to kick in some assistance. I love that concept. It's just really clear. Like I'm finding that this work is just really clear. Neely Fuller, and this is 60 years ago, did a very clear description of what ways to go about presenting ourselves such that what we could produce is justice. And yeah, I think we're a propaganda machine away. And those of us that are tools, being creative, being marketing, I know you are, Dan, I think, and Ed. But those of us that have that inkling to put it out there in palatable ways, that's what's up, because all of us need to get it, not just Black folk, but everybody. And I'll mute. But thank you again.
Thank you. Yeah, I do. I really do agree. You cannot throw a book at victims. I remember in my early days of learning, reading the code, because learning it was something different. Or reading code,
Right.
I was trying to.
Right.
Yeah, I was trying to dump this info on all the Black people I could, because I'm like, okay, we got the solution now. Let's use it. But it's not. It's far from that easy. And
Right.
definitely experienced a lot of discomfort and disappointment when trying to dump this book on people, despite how necessary it is for the brain computers. That with the ice papers as well.
I wanted to answer the question. So in regards to have I experienced these 4Ds: disapproval, disappointment, discomfort, and death? I would have to agree with what 05 said. I have not experienced death, but I have experienced all three of the ones prior: disapproval, disappointment, and discomfort, whether it be in regards to my feelings about how other victims receive the compensatory counter-racist logic, or whether it be how other victims treat me. I felt that since I've been talking about counter-racism, I have been met with a lot of disapproval. A lot of people don't agree, a lot of victims, I should say, don't agree with, I guess, practicing counter-racism in general. I've kind of summed it up to being comfortable with the tragic arrangement in place. Disappointment, I've experienced that as well. I've experienced it, when speaking to other victims about counter-racism, being very disappointed in kind of their response to it. But that is to be expected under the system of racism, white supremacy. And kind of disappointment also, disappointment and discomfort coming from my victim unit, my attempted parents sometimes, being disappointed that I'm not aspiring for materials or wealth, I should say, not aspiring to accumulate all the wealth that I can or all the materials that I can, which has led to some discomfort for me at times when speaking about counter-racism. I've always been somebody that can really tell. I pay attention to body language a lot. So when speaking about counter-racism, I can tell when people are getting uncomfortable, which often makes me uncomfortable. So I definitely have experienced these. That's it for me for now.
Very, very well said. So I think this is a really significant part of the code as well, from 248. The code states, question, what is the correct thing for you to say when someone suggests that you should use your time and energy doing something other than trying to end racism and or trying to produce justice. Say, I have been, or answer, say I have been assigned to do what I am doing. The people who assigned me are the people who have produced or who have failed to end the practice of white supremacy racism. If white supremacy racism did not exist, there would be no reason for any person to be assigned to end it. There's reason to believe that as long as racism exists, it is the duty of each person who is aware of its existence to use all of his or her time and energy trying to end it and trying to replace it with justice. I think I really like that part of the code because I spent I would say at least 22 of my hours like thinking about the system of racism, white supremacy, and I think that's because it's attached to literally everything that I do. No matter how constructive or non-constructive it is, it's always some kind of reaction to racism, white supremacy. So it's really, for lack of a better word, validating to see that it's in the code to always be aware of the war going on. Racism is definitely a war. And prior to being attempting to be on code, I was definitely spending a lot of my time and energy very frivolously, doing lots of things while very, very, if at all, not thinking about the system of white supremacy, not even having the awareness that I should be thinking about this problem, even though I have spent a lot of my time and energy like trying to understand why cops keep killing, or why race soldiers keep killing Black people, and why this planet is so messed up. So really validating. We should be using our time and energy to solve the world's greatest problem, which is racism and white supremacy. So I'm glad that's in the code.
I'm sorry, are you saying that's wrong for you to do O5?
Oh no, I'm saying I like that. I like that it's in the code because it's validating. I think it's really constructive to do that.
Oh,
yeah,
definitely.
You don't
I
have
was
any-
gonna add that I remember in one of Neely Fuller's shows that how when you're younger you're asked like what do you want to be when you grow up, and he said everyone should want to be a problem solver. So I've personally started to say that like I want to be a problem solver. I've tried to get my younger siblings to say that as well, but the idea that you want to be a problem solver, when you want to be a problem solver, you want to solve the biggest problem, right? And the biggest problem on the planet is racism, white supremacy. So I agree that is a very nice to hear. Nice that's in the code to be reinforced.
Yeah, it's reiterated multiple times in different ways as well. So definitely stresses the importance of thinking about ways to solve this problem. Yeah, I would love to put this in practice and be able to respond to someone who's questioning my use of time and energy in regards to the race problem. Any more comments?
I would like to add something. On page 254, it says, what is the correct thing to say when someone criticizes a person's chosen method of speaking or acting to end racism and or speaking or acting to produce justice? And the answer was, I'm choosing my method and I expect others to choose theirs. I hope that somebody's method succeeds. And that really just stood out, like out of all the things I've read for this section, was just like one of my, I don't want to say my favorite part, but just something that really stood out. Because I feel like sometimes we spend a lot of time just like, well, half the time we're not talking about solutions, but I think some of the things is talking about ways that we like methods of ending racism, white supremacy, and replacing it with a system of justice is like everyone has their own way. And I think like some people are like, oh, that's not going to work, or this is not going to work, you know. So I think it's just like really just having everyone like, hey, just choose a method that you feel or that you believe from your logic or from logic itself that could potentially produce a system of justice or end racism, white supremacy, which will have to happen first. But I think that's something just to think about too, like as we're talking. And that also leads me to my other point that I have when you're speaking to like white people and you are asking them like, hey, do you want to produce a system of justice? Or do you want to end, racism, white supremacy? And it's just like when you're asking those questions, it had a section here where it says like, almost like help them if they're not there yet. You know, because I feel like even talking to people, like I don't feel like anyone's really there yet until they actually get there, or and they actually study it or read about it or hear about it. I think when you wake up and you're like, I'm going to produce justice, no one really knows what that means until you actually start reading books and really trying to understand what that actually means. So I thought this was a great thing too, especially when we get to solution based and thinking about methods of how to end this massive problem, instead of just like, oh, I'm going to end racism, white supremacy, and produce justice, and keep saying that phrase over and over again. I think when we start putting it to practice is really thinking about the method that you have chosen, and then almost like, I don't want to use the word respectful, but almost like just say like, I chose my method, you choose yours. Hopefully one of ours works, you know? And I thought that was a great response.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that. I also like that because too many times we focus on what other people are doing and their methods, which, you know, kind of falls under VGQ, right? Like this is what they're doing about racism. You know, that's their qualification. They can do or say whatever they want about racism. You know, because oftentimes when you're focusing too much on what other people are doing, you tend to, you know, spend a lot of time criticizing them, and you know, that's time and energy that can be used towards something else, used towards you developing your methods, or you using, if you don't like their method, rather than spend so much time and energy criticizing them, use that time and energy to develop your own method.
And then also, also just to add, thank you, Quake, you reminded me of something. Also, when we're thinking about people who came before us, and we're analyzing and studying like the method that they have chosen and seeing what worked and didn't work. I think that is a way too of like almost preparing yourself, like, okay, this is the method I personally want to take. And then being able to like work it out in different angles and actually putting it to work. And I think one of the things too that Neely Fuller always mentions is try it out. You know, that's like one of my favorite phrases that he always says. And it's like, try it out for yourself and see what happens. See the results. So I think that's very important to think about. I've been studying Frederick Douglass, W.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, and Malcolm X. I've been actually studying them for my research and looking at like just the methods they've chosen and just what they talk about. I can't say that they would blatantly say like their problem is racism, white supremacy, but just thinking of like what they saw the problem as and what method they chose, and still like we're here today at the same spot. So I think it's just like some of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm reading this. It's like learning from all of these individuals who came before us, who are currently writing about this and practicing this as a way to like create a method and actually executing it.
Thank you for that, Nana. Yeah, and quite cute. That's also a good way to look at studying the mistakes made in the history. Like, okay, what methods did the so-called Black empires have that were successful in countering the problem, and which methods weren't? Totally understand why that's in the code. On 250, I really like this part. because just lots of logic. And before the counter racism, I wasn't really familiar with logic outside of racist propaganda called philosophy, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But the code states, when other non-white people show little or no interest in trying to end white supremacy racism, regardless of how much you talk to them about the need to do so. So and then there's a bunch of there's like 9 bullet points of like suggestions. And I really like number 6, which says, when all others seem to be disinterested or seem to be unwilling to say or do that which may be of value in helping to end racism and replacing it with justice, continue to do what you can alone. And I really like number 7 as well, which says, do not regard any other activity as a priority. Remember, regard the ending of racism and the production of justice as the assignment, as the dominant purpose for your existence in the known universe at this time. Makes a lot of sense to I guess to be centered around your existence, to understand that my existence is to help to end racism and white supremacy, and this is a task I should be able to work on alone. And I believe that is the United Independent mentality, is to just see that we're in this war essentially alone. You know, there's other non-white people who are in this war, but it's not necessarily that we're allies or friends due to how this system is designed. I hope that made sense. But
And just to add to that, thank you, 0526. I like the number 9 on that same 250, on page 251, number 9. It says, do not act as if it is necessary to comment on everything that happens. Say nothing that is not a substantial improvement on silence. And I just think about being in school where it's like you almost are forced to say something even if you don't have anything to say. So I think like really taking this into account is only saying something when I have something to say, because sometimes you say something to get like brownie points, especially coming from like education. Like you have to like in discussions and really implementing that for when I'm in class as well, and outside of school. It's like being okay with silence.
That is something that I have been working very diligently on. Something that I definitely struggled with in the past, just because I feel that I've been trained and taught to dislike silence, to almost feel anxiety when it's silent. For example, we have meetings for work Wednesdays, and they would ask a question, ask for comments on whether or not like people's thoughts, basically. And I used to feel very obligated to say something, whether I wouldn't even care what I said, just as long as it seemed somewhat relevant. But whatever it was, it had to be it. I just had to say something. I don't know if it was in order for me to be seen or to feel like I was contributing, but I definitely feel like I keep hearing that it has to be say nothing that is not a substantial improvement on silence. So I'm always asking myself, is whatever I'm about to say, is it an improvement on silence right now? Well, whatever I'm about to say, is it more important? And it's something that I've been practicing a lot. And thank God I have those meetings to practice that. I'm trying to practice it in other areas, in other places in my life, but that was somewhere that I felt was going to be very difficult for me to practice something like that.
Very, very well said. Did anyone, any others like to share something from the text?
Oh, I wanted to also on that of that list, I also I highlighted number 5, which says, "Do not despair. Continue to think, study, speak, and act to be as effective as you can in influencing events in a manner that best helps to end racism and that helps to produce justice." I highlighted, be persistent and practice asking questions more than making statements. So that because talking about counter racism, I always felt that with this particular, I would start to feel very like I don't think desperate, but almost like there's no hope really. Nobody's getting it. It seems like, oh, we're the only ones out here, or I'm the only one out here, and nobody's understanding it. So I think it was at the Wellsing Institute where they mentioned, being the role model, being the model of the people for people to see. So that's kind of what this reminded me of, being like we mentioned, being a counter racist and being in the business of counter racism is definitely not easy, and there aren't a lot of people involved in it. So I think it's important that we do not despair, and we be the role models, like showing people that you can still enjoy yourself and be constructive at the same time. It shouldn't only be that engaging in unconstructive activities is what brings enjoyment to your life.
Yeah, I agreed. It's very hard not to feel very, very incorrect when thinking about, well, not even thinking about, when living in the system of race and white supremacy. I very, very definitely understand. It's very hard for me to I would suspect most counter racists, but people in general, possibly the system is just so incorrect and just so violent. I particularly don't know how, except for just from discontinuing social media's use, how I'm supposed to not get upset or annoyed when I just see racism and white supremacy 24/7, whether it's in the form of a race soldier killing a Black person or in the form of a bunch of non-white people being silly on the internet. So just something to counter, I guess. Yes, Ms. Williams.
A few things that I wanted to point from my observation of reading the chapter. On page 246, where it's talking about, according to the compensatory counter-racist logic, you should, for the most part, expect to receive disapproval, disappointment, discomfort, and death. Now, as I read that, I didn't take that personal because, and no offense to nobody who practiced Christianity, but when I was in Christianity, I learned to deal with all of that, right? And in dealing with that, when they taught us to evangelize, right, that we had to prepare ourselves for disapproval, disappointment, discomfort, and even to the point of death, right? Like so-called Jesus, right? So when I look at countering racism, white supremacy, I see it in that same light. So those things come natural with the territory. And then on page 250, number 6, it says, when others seem to be disinterested or seem to be unwilling to say or to do, which may be of value in helping to end racism and replacing it with justice, continue to do it alone. And that was a part of that training too, right? And it's to the point that when we say we're united and independent, right, is that we know as a group where we're united, but in our approach to counter racism, we have to take it on an individual level. Mine may not be your specific way of how you may do it, and yours may not be mine, but if it produces constructive outcome, then it's still worthwhile. And then another point I wanted to bring out on page 251, his question says, what is correct way to end racism and white supremacy? I love these two answers. Number one, answer, non-white people putting to use the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept. And number two, white people doing everything that is necessary to practice the quality relationship required in regards to non-white people at all times, all places, all areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, war, and counter war. I mute my mic.
Yeah, I do think those are very viable solutions. We just need to get an effective numbers to test to see if the code is correct. Thanks for all that input, Ms. Williams. Definitely united, independent, united, because we're all tired of not tired, but just have the will to attempt to produce justice while we're on this planet.
I had a section I wanted to mention.
Please do.
On page 249, when it says, when is it correct to argue with non-white people about racism and or counter-racism? Answer, I'm not gonna read the whole thing, just the parts that I highlighted. Answer, never. Present your opinion and do so in a quiet, orderly, courteous manner. Ask them to present their opinion the same way. If there's a difference of opinion, do not shout, use profanity, name call, or be discourteous to those who disagree with you. Deliberately refuse to argue with non-white people about matters of race, racism, and or counter-racism. Instead of arguing endlessly with non-white people about what to do and what not to do about racism, speak against the lack of correct speech and action by those white people who are best able to end racism, but who have not done so. That last section, that last paragraph that I read right now, that one was it reminds me of kind of when, I think it was at the last meeting for Yoruba, but Silent Warrior had mentioned, always keeping the focus on the racist. And that's exactly kind of what that's saying, what that paragraph is saying to me, is always keep the focus on the racist rather than getting upset that you're not seeing eye to eye with this other victim. That's exactly what BGQ is for, but you're not seeing eye to eye with this victim and spending all this time and energy discussing why you aren't coming eye to eye on how to solve this problem. Focus on the actions of the people who are most able to do something about this problem and why they haven't done anything about it. So I thought that part was very, very good. And then skipping the next one, the next paragraph where it says, if you think that a specific white person is a racist, refer to him or her as being a racist suspect. Do not call any person a racist. Instead, describe and define what a person who is a racist does. Describe and define what a racist is. Then discuss and or describe what the person is doing or saying or not doing or saying as compared to the description and definition of a racist. So I wasn't sure how to say this, but it's basically like making an argument for a racist suspect, like not to name call, but everything all the actions, the way you're speaking, the actions, the behavior these are things that racists do, but yet you say you're not a racist. And it's kind of brilliant to approach it like that. Because in my opinion, when I got introduced to Racist Suspect, I thought this is genius, you know, rather than going, I think it's almost, it seems almost worse to be called like a racist suspect than an actual racist, because you can't prove that somebody's a racist, but telling them that you suspect them of racism it's like now they have to do everything in their power to convince you otherwise. So I thought that was really good.
I had something I want to add back to that. The one point Nana Yah had brought up on page 254 about whose method would be best for solving the problem. And then what Kwaku said about just victims possibly going back and forth over which method would be best. When it comes to solving this problem, we should be efficient in our interactions with one another, because we are in Area 6, politics, people relations. We should be willing to share constructive information with other victims, whether we like the victim or not, especially ones that are attempting to solve the problem. And I'm pretty generous with providing information and stuff, because like the Discord server, for example, I made that whole resources page of just like everything I know. So hopefully everyone here has seen it and maybe use some of the stuff. And that's just the stuff that you can go to. That doesn't even count for my personal archives. Like whether you like the victim or not, if it's someone attempting to solve the problem, provide them with constructive information, so someone method will succeed at getting this problem solved. So that's what I have to say. Whether you like them or not, share the info.
Yeah, one of the many ways racism is practiced is by withholding constructive information, particularly from Black people.
Oh, one other thing too, especially that one part in Area 2 education written at the top of the resources page. We're not constructive at consolidating information and passing it down. That's why we lose and forget a lot of things. So we learned something that we knew like 100 years ago too. So I really like that point in this book overall in Area 2 education.
Any more?
Yeah.
comments from the book?
On 247, where he says, question, what is the correct thing to say to those people who speak and act as if they have deliberately decided to spend little or no time and energy trying to end racism or trying to produce justice? Answer, be extremely courteous and at the same time try to say as little to them as is constructively necessary. Also, do not under any circumstance allow someone to talk you into believing that you do not have a constructive assignment. I'm going to end there, but I feel that oftentimes, especially talking of, for example, my attempted parents, when speaking to them, and just people in general, because I've come to understand specifically like on the topic of veganism, being vegan, not eating meat. I've come to understand that the production of meat and fish that is the leading cause, one of the major causes to climate change. The earth basically being eroded because of all the greenhouse gases. There's so much land that needs to be consumed for these animals to live in order so that we can eat them, and they don't provide us with any not nearly enough nutritional value. Basically, it costs way more to take care of these animals than it's worth. So when I'm often talking about how I don't eat meat anymore, I'm thinking that I get a lot of laughs, especially from my attempted parents. Oh, what are you gonna eat? What are you gonna do when you go back to Ghana? What are you gonna eat? Everybody eats meat, blah blah blah. This, and it just reminds me of somebody like trying to talk me out of doing something that I've seen as that has high constructive value, not only for myself, but I feel that I'm not creating any problems by not participating in eating meat. So That's what I was thinking of when in this. So not only does it have to do directly with racism, but like almost indirectly, trying to get me to trying to get me or and trying to get me or sometimes other victims to start engaging in unconstructive activities, even though they've made choices that they would deem of constructive value. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, it does, because eating clearer makes you have a clearer mind, a clear concept of the way you think when you start to eat cleaner. And then you can get in tune with your spiritual side, your consciousness, your ancestors, because you're eating more clear, you're more clear to think and to see things in a different perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kwaku and Ms. Carice. Dr. Sinki, would you like to chime in?
Yes, I just wanted to say, Kwaku made me think about something that I've observed about the system, and it seems that non-white people, well, white people and non-white people, I would say non-white people are trained to do it. I think white people choose to do it, but it appears to me that the system is the training is designed in a way to make Black people who attempt to do constructive things feel inadequate and insecure about the constructive thing that they're attempting to do. And one of the things that I've found over the years to help me ignore that is it's kind of an affirmation that basically if I hear someone, especially someone who's close to me that I've grown to trust, if they start saying using words to make me feel inadequate and insecure, I'll say I use my name. I say, I, Khalif, will not worry about what other people think, do, or say about my own constructive actions. And I tend to say that to myself while they're saying what they're saying, while I'm remaining silent verbally. I'm not saying anything verbally, but I'm thinking it. And that seems to work for me. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Nanaya?
Yeah, and then just to add, as you guys are talking, it kind of reminds me of, I think it's a phrase that says it takes two to party or something like that. Thinking of being unconstructive, if you notice, there's always someone in your life who it almost like wants to invite you to be unconstructive. It's like they can't be unconstructive by themselves, so they invite you to be unconstructive with them to make them feel better about themselves. And it's very interesting to the amount of no invites that I get, or the amount of invites I get, and they're like, hey, let's go to this restaurant. And I'm just like, but what am I going to eat? Like, there's nothing on the menu that I can eat, so I'm not going to go. But it's so easy to just like do that rather than someone saying, oh, you know what, let's go to a place that everyone can eat, or whatever it is. Like, it just reminded me of the whole idea of like, if someone wants to be unconstructive, they have to invite you to do it with them so they can feel good about it. And then oftentimes it's like, well, you did it too. And then I had another thought, but I feel like I forgot it. Oh, yes. And then Kwaku about the being plant-based, just thinking about that. But I think it's one of those things too, is like once you start to look into, like once you start diving into racism, white supremacy itself, and you look at all the avenues again, all the people activities, areas of activities, and you really dive in, it's almost like everything perpetuates racism, white supremacy. So that's why it's so unique to every individual what they decide that they do not want to perpetuate anymore. And I think one of the things I get asked that a lot is like, oh, why don't you eat meat? Or, oh, why don't you do this anymore? Oh, why don't you do that? Or why don't you do this? And it's just like, because I just chosen not to, because it perpetuates racism and white supremacy. But I think it's just like, they'll always come to, well, this perpetuates it too, or this other thing. And it's like, well, that's the areas I've chosen so far. And then thank you, Dr. Seng Kyu, who mentioned like just almost like being okay with the decision that you made, the constructive decision that you made. And I think it's just really sitting with that and saying, I said what I said. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you quickly for that. For mentioning the eating, because we've been definitely trained to eat poison and enjoy poison. I think that also could be added to this list, page 253, eating, because 253 the code states, question: what is the correct thing to say when someone says that trying to end racism, white supremacy is not as important as doing other things? Answer: say speaking and or acting with the intention of ending racism and white supremacy is necessary in order to give constructive meaning to any of the following activities: acquiring great amounts of money, attending church, temple, mosque, synagogue, being a lawyer, being a success, being celebrating anything, choosing a mate, marriage, choosing friends, dancing, happiness, killing people, listening to music, producing self-respect, raising children, sexual intercourse, talking about finding or producing love, talking about justice, telling jokes, traveling for fun or learning, voting, work, labor. You can really add to this list for infinity, but without any like constructive purpose, all of this, as far as I'm concerned, is just nonsense, and helps to maintain and possibly even refine the system of white supremacy if we're delving into these things unaware of that we're living in a system of white supremacy. So I definitely think eating, definitely, especially like participating in your murder by eating murderous foods, is definitely supporting white supremacy for sure. Really appreciated all the dialogue around that. Are there any
And let's add one more. Yeah, I just have one more thing to add. One of the things too that I was having like not trouble with, but just thinking about continuously is the idea of just like doing a little, whatever you can to produce justice in the moments that you're in, and not always feeling like you have to do something big. Because sometimes we get into these conversations, I can almost count on my hand how many times that I've been asked a question, or I heard someone ask someone else the same question is, so what are you doing to produce justice or solve the problem? Or what have you done? Like it has to be like this elaborate thing. Because once you start going off the list of things that you have done to produce justice or attempt to produce justice, and whether they're small, big, whatever, it's like they always ask you, like, what have you done? Like, have you started this educational system? Have you done this? Have you done these big old things? And it almost like makes you feel some type of way. Like, so are you like not degrading, but dismissing like the little things that have to be done like before the big things, if that makes sense.
They make you
It's
feel
very
like
interesting.
you're not doing enough.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, that I remember one of the like radio talks we did, and someone asked like what can like we do, like what can all of us Black people do, like how can we get together, because they always wanted to do something grand like that, like a million of Black people getting together and solving the problem, and it's not necessarily gonna look like that. We don't need to get in mass to solve this problem. We just need to get very, very serious and do all that we can. And most of us, due to the situation of white supremacy, can only do very little. But anything is better than doing absolutely nothing, which is what most of us are doing. So we're getting into the 10 stops now. And the first one is to stop snitching. Definitely have experienced a so-called snitch causing many problems for my victim unit growing up. So I see how damaging that phenomenon is, snitching, and how racist man, racist woman love to get us to snitch on one another. I think that could be a great example of the whole just how our racist man, racist woman operate. It's the first 48 where they try to catch a killer in 48 hours. That's a great show, and how they get non-white people to snitch on each other. The second stop is to stop name calling. Definitely, I think I've managed to participate or to diminish the amount I name call, especially on Twitter, because it's just so hard to not call a person exhibiting pitiful behavior, a pitiful person. But I guess that is a form of name calling, despite if the description is accurate. So that's something I'm working on. Well, as for in the digital space, I don't have much issue with that in real life. I call everyone basically sir, white or non-white, just to be as courteous as possible. Any comments from any of the stops so far?
Yeah, regarding snitching, I'd like to get like thoughts. Everybody's thoughts can comment on it. But yesterday was trash day. My apartment's right next to the trash can. So when the trash is overflowing, people tend to leave the trash on the ground, and it's just all in front of my garage and everything. So I went to the rental office to let them know that somebody's car was parked in front of the trash can. So the garbage man couldn't come to pick up the trash. So I was asking them, "Oh, can you like leave a notice or something on the trash can, let them know, like to let people know that trash is coming on Tuesday." So just so they're aware of when the trash comes. Do you think that is a form of snitching? I mean,
No.
Yeah, definitely not, because you're trying to get constructive results without selling someone out or so yeah, according to the code and there's really extensive text involving snitching. No, that is not snitching at all. Dr. Singh,
It benefited everybody in that building instead of just you. It wasn't a favor for you. It's the trash that affects everybody that dumps their stuff in there.
Yeah, I want to say, even if you're seeking to help yourself, it's not snitching. It's, I believe snitching is when, well, gosh, I guess that could be, well, I believe snitching is in exchange for a reward, like in exchange for money. But if you're trying to talk to the, give information to the authorities, the people in power, so that they can make sure that things work out constructively for you and others, I don't see how that could be snitching. But generally it's like, you know, maybe if there was a reward that said, hey, you know, if you catch somebody blocking the parking spaces, call this number and we'll give you $50. You're not doing it. If you were doing it just for the $50 instead of doing it to help, then it would be snitching.
Read the definition of snitching. That's in the code book.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah. There's a definition in the 1984 version of the code book.
Oh, I don't have that one. Is it on 255 in this one where it says, I don't think that's the definition. It says snitching does not mean speaking to protect yourself or others from false accusations or from other unjust acts. Snitching does mean to say something to try to get ahead of someone else by taking unjust advantage of his or her lack of correct judgment. I mean, reading that, I don't consider that snitching.
Yeah.
Snitching isn't in the 1984 one. I'm looking in the glossary in the back. I don't see it, but yeah, I don't think that's snitching though. It's happened right where I am. I guess wherever there's a lot of black people, that's common.
Yeah, and just to give the codified term for snitching, the code states is on 254 of the 2016 edition. To snitch is to willfully and deliberately volunteer information about a person with the specific intention of gaining direct or indirect personal favors and or praise from the racist white supremacists. So you definitely were not snitching, but we're just looking for, you were looking for a constructive resource and to solve a problem, I believe.
Not in the word guide either.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Dan.
there was that's the same definition as it was in the 84 version, but in the 84 version, it's not in the glossary section. It's in a different section of the book.
It's in the area of politics where it says stop snitching. Under
Yeah,
the 10
okay.
stops.
Okay.
That's where.
So yeah, if you read the code book, then you have to also read the definition of the words that's in the code book in order to understand what Fuller meant. Now, you may not agree with it, and it's fine, but you still have to, everything comes down to the definition, everything. So if you gloss over that and try to, in a practical sense, try to understand the code book from the perspective of how words are defined in Merriam-Webster, then you're going to lose sight of what's being said. So anytime you come across something that you don't understand, make sure you look up that definition in the code. Now, if it's not in the code, call Mr. Fuller.
Okay, I found it in the 1984 one. Now, it is on page 49 of the 1984 one. This is the 10 stops from 1984. Number 1, stop snitching. Reason, explanation. To snitch is to willfully and deliberately volunteer information about a person or persons with the specific intention of gaining direct or indirect personal favors and or praise from racists. When victims of racism, non-white people carry messages about and or witness against any person or persons in a manner that gives aid and comfort to racists, such actions only help to promote injustice. It is just and correct for all persons to the best of their will and ability to avoid situations wherein they believe they may be tempted to and or expected to snitch. Snitching does not mean speaking to protect yourself from false accusations or from other unjust acts. snitching does mean to say something to try to get ahead of someone else by taking unjust advantage of his or her lack of correct judgment. Page 49 of the 1984 edition.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, so that's really broad. You know, it's not. For example, you might have a white friend, not you in particular, but you know, a non-white person might have a white friend who asks, "Well, what do you do this weekend?" You know, and this white friend is living through this non-white person vicariously, living through their experiences vicariously. And said, "Oh well, you know, got with this female, did such and such, such and such. You know, we, you know, went back to the house and went to the bedroom, did this and that." And that's snitching. Nobody's getting in trouble as a result of it, you know. But to give out that information, you know, because you think that helps to maintain your friendship with that white person and keeps them coming back to you for more conversations and more information, snitching. So, you know, you want to avoid situations like that. And that's just one small example. There are many examples. You really have to rethink snitching, you know, from a counter perspective versus what it means in the streets.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that example also falls into an example of gossiping. I think that was as well. Number 3 on the 10 stops is to stop cursing. I'm definitely working on this one as well. And to curse, the codified definition of this is to curse people is to use profanity towards them in a manner that is likely to be thought of as insulting or aggressive. This often results in the promotion of hostility. The hostility promoted oftentimes serve no constructive purposes. Using curse words oftentimes promotes name calling, discourtesy, and unnecessary fighting and or killing. So yeah, even when I get into Twitter beefs, and I'm getting called all types of niggas and lame niggas and bum ass niggas, I still don't curse or call them curse words, even if I am name calling in other ways. So I think this is also one of the ways to maintain that conversational power, because if someone's cursing at you, then you're clearly doing something something that they feel it takes if someone's cursing at you, they are already losing the conversation, argument, or debate, or whatever it is. Not that we should be debating or arguing with one another, but that's what cursing means as far as I'm concerned. Sure, it probably has some like spiritual or metaphysical connotations to what cursing means, but I don't know about any of that. Just they wouldn't call it cursing if it didn't have something to do with that. I believe it is a variation of the word curse. So number 4, stop gossiping. We would save a lot of time and energy if we practice stop gossiping. I think gossiping is how we allow other people to have mental real estate in our minds, which is like we're thinking about other people, and that serves no constructive, for me personally, it serves no constructive value for me to be thinking about people who are not in the same room as me, or if I'm not gaining some sort of some kind of just constructive value. Like I think gossiping allows people to live in your head rent free, which is not a good way to use your head, as far as I'm concerned. And I'm just gonna read short definition of gossip as well. Stop gossiping. This is on 256. To gossip about a person is to say something about that person to someone other than that person that you would not be willing to say directly to that person at the same time in place with those other persons listening. Gossip promotes injustice. Oftentimes, it leads to hostility, which in turn often leads to snitching, name calling, cursing, fighting, and/or killing. Gossip promotes confusion and unnecessary suspicion. It serves no constructive purpose. Yeah, I think just like online areas are related to one another, our 10 stops are definitely related to one another for sure.
I got a question
Go ahead.
about gossiping. Is this an example of gossiping? Let's say somebody has a issue at work with their boss and they tell you about it and they ask you how do you go about it. Is that a form considered of gossiping because it's, of course, of somebody else that you're having an issue with?
Not unless you're unwilling to repeat what was said to that person. But maybe incorrect.
Gossip is in the word guide. And that's page 139 of the word guide. Gossip, use this word to apply to anything said about a person with the intention of doing social or material harm to that person without that person being immediately informed of what is being said, who is saying it, and why it is being said. This pertains particularly to things said about a person that are intended to criticize, belittle, and or express contempt for that person. Page 139 of the word guide.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does.
But stop being discourteous. Definitely constructive suggestion. Yeah, another 10 stop being discourteous. I am gonna read some of it from this number 6 stop, which is stop stealing. Which is something we have been trained to do very, very efficiently, apparently. Okay, so part of the reasons to stop stealing, I'm only going to read some of it because it's a huge explanation. In a world social material system dominated by white supremacists, all people are enticed to steal or condone stealing by some people under some conditions. Those white people who practice white supremacy have stolen more things from people and have stolen more people from themselves than any other category of people in a known universe. So, you know, the biggest thieves, the biggest stealers are racist man and racist woman. And I just thought it was really, really interesting how we are literally owned by people who classify themselves as white, whether we like to look at it as not. So yeah, unless you can compete with that kind of theft, you probably shouldn't be stealing. The code says it's better to beg than to steal. And as a person who's been a victim of theft, it's very, very annoying to be stolen from, especially from other non-white people. So we should stop doing that.
In regards to stealing, I thought that there's a lot more, I don't want to say effort, but he definitely went into detail about this. I didn't think stealing would take up so much I'm trying to find the right words. I didn't think stealing would be so important, but after reading it, it makes a lot of sense. One part that I highlighted was stealing causes a person to put a greater value on the thing stolen rather than on the value of justice. And I had to think real deeply about that because I might go to Walmart, self checkout. I might not pay for something or two. In the back of my head, I used to think, oh well, this white supremacist organization, stealing from the world and everything. They got all this money and all this stuff is overvalued, overpriced anyway. So I'm not hurting anybody when I do that. But, after reading that, I definitely disagree with that, with what I was saying before. I think that, when you are stealing, it's almost saying you don't care for the imbalance. You don't care about balance between all people. You only care about getting what you think you deserve. So stop stealing. I'm trying to, sorry, I lost my page. Yeah, so stop stealing. That was one thing. And one thing that I found I kind of needed another explanation, but on page 257, the second paragraph towards the end, where he says, when stealing helps to maintain, expand, and or refine the practice of white supremacy, it is generally not considered to be stealing. It is oftentimes called progress. So I didn't understand that last part where it says oftentimes called progress. Anybody
Can I jump? Yeah, quickly. Can I? For me, the code is almost bringing us back to a semblance of what normalcy, what a connected tribal village, just world would be like. It's like Neely is trying to describe how everything we do in our behavioral system is codified supremacy, white supremacy. And this is breaking us out of that spell, if you will. It's almost like we're hoodwinked into behaving in this white codified way of stealing is right, it's correct. And everything that we're supposed to be doing, one of the cartoons I peeped earlier today was talking about hair, how us as Black folk are programmed to just be thinking about our hair all the darn time and what we're going to do with our hair. And because we're doing that, we're not thinking about anything else, including dismantling white supremacy. So for me, it's that larger context, if that makes sense, Kwaku. Like Neely is trying to open the door or take away the veil on what society is programming us to be. And that is ingrate, non-productive copies, and not good copies of white supremacists, but copies of this perverted system. And stealing, like the other piece that I think 05 was just reading, it's all under that context of destroying the precepts of what white culture is teaching us and replacing it also subtly with justice and or not so subtly, but replacing it with real just decency. Like, how do you be a decent person? How do you be a decent human being? It's so foreign to what we're being programmed with, whether it's through TV or other socialized humans. Am I helping clarify it at all?
Yes, yeah, that was very well said. I definitely would agree with that. I think when you say he's trying to almost kind of help us reprogram ourselves to not partake in the codified white supremacy and their behaviors, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah, and to answer the question further, And in regards to the last couple of sentences, when stealing helps to maintain, expand, and or refine the practice of white supremacy, it is not generally considered to be stealing. It is oftentimes called progress. This is takes us back to Yurugu and how we have determined that progress is always at the cost of non-white people, at the cost of their resources, their land, and their lives. So white people have developed a system where they could go conquer, take people's resources, take their lives, kill them, rape them, subjugate them, and they call that progress. You know, that is the true progress, us being mistreated and them being able to expand their mistreatment to other parts of the globe. So yeah, definitely a Eureka moment if we're contextualizing the text.
So disgusting when you recognize it.
Yeah, this entire system is very disgusting, to say the least. To say the least.
Yeah, thank you. Another example that makes me think about is the medical apartheid, medical slavery, and how in the name of science, abusing, mistreating slaves, sorry, not slaves, African people, human beings, and really, and then turning around calling it progress, not calling it exactly what it is, which is mistreatment, because a lot of that was done against people's will, etc. So that makes sense to me.
So the last three are to stop robbing, which is to steal from someone and they know that you did it. Stop fighting, stop killing, except when defending your own life or some kind of really precious piece of property. I don't really yeah, I guess I understand that property bit, but yeah.
I wanted to go back to stop stealing real quick.
Oh yeah, go for it.
There's another part on 257. We're at the top of the second to last paragraph where he says, racists oftentimes ridicule their subjects because they do not have or do not want to have many things that the racists say that a subject should strive to obtain. The racists say that their subjects are backwards if they do not want and strive to get all the things that racists say that a subject should have. I like how he put that backwards in quotation marks. This kind of reminds me of kind of like a Urugu a little bit, because subjects of victims of racism oftentimes kind of do that to other victims. They ridicule them for not having these material possessions, and if another victim has no intentions or no desire to have that which they believe they should strive for, they're often ridiculed at times as well. And then when he put it backwards in quotation marks, so my attempted parent, she grew up in Ghana in the village, and she was telling me about how they used to like preserve their food. She said that they would kind of like dig a hole, and like I think it had to do with certain like vegetables. Like they would dig a hole in the ground and they would preserve their vegetables like that. You know where the food is, and then you take it back out. All you gotta do is wash it, and food could last for months like that. And just thinking about that, I thought like, wow, that's such a smart, sustainable way to take care of like food. You don't need you don't need anything else. Like you're using what's around and available to you. But then thinking how the Europeans would come in and say that these people are backwards, they're uncivilized because they don't want like refrigerators or something, right? They don't like. Meanwhile, you have to. It really requires that somebody's mistreated to create a refrigerator. I don't know where they get the materials from, but I know that in order to make metals and all this, somebody is being mistreated somewhere to create that. So when he put that in and called it backwards, like that's exactly what the racists call those type of those kind of activities, or those kind of those tactics, I guess. You know, using what's available to you, using the resources that you have, often sustainable resources, would oftentimes be considered backwards to racists. You know, and sometimes even to, I guess, to the victims nowadays through no fault of their own, just because of the system.
Yeah, it seems like they had a code for how to preserve food that was very constructive. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mr. Kwaku. Oh, so the final, well, the last two stops are to stop killing one another. No, just stop killing in general. And then number 10 is to stop squabbling among yourselves and asking the racist white supremacists to settle it. This reminds me of someone in my victim unit who recently got into like a habit of calling race soldiers on other people and their victim unit. She would get drunk and just cause problems, and then she would call the racist suspects, the race soldiers, to help squabble her like the mess she literally created. And I remember her doing this one night, and I was there. I was very much confused and not familiar with the code, or totally unaware of its existence and its need. So I see that my victim unit, someone in my victim unit had literally called the cops on her offspring, and I'm yelling, you know, it's the middle of the night, yelling that you called the effing ops on your daughter. Like, what the F is wrong with you? Or like, you called the effing ops, and the cops like were like, yeah, you come here, and I was like, I cursed them out, and then I went upstairs because I was confused, but I wasn't that, you know, that confused to know that why would I walk towards a gang of cops in the middle of the night while cursing at them. So I went back, and it was just wow, a great example of why we should stop squabbling among ourselves, because we usually got to get white people involved to solve our problems, and that is how the system has been designed. And I'm gonna read but for the last bit of
I wanted to comment on 10, or you said you were gonna read from 10?
yeah, you can make the comment. Go ahead.
So 10 I thought was pretty much I would deem the most important one. I thought the first thing that came to mind was I watched a documentary on the Civil War, in Nigeria. So basically, when Nigeria became independent, what had happened was there's three groups of basically three tribes of people living in that country at the time. When the white supremacists left, they left their institutions, so their like political structure, and the people elected to keep that structure. And I thought that was their first mistake, trying to adopt a white supremacist institution or political structure, whatever you want to call it. And so they went into a civil war. It's called the Biafran War. And all I could think about was, you know, that it took these white people to come back for them to end that war. They went out and were, you know, killing one another, and the war wouldn't stop unless the white supremacists came back. There was even points in time where they went out to seek help from, you know, the United States, Europe, etc., to help them end the war. But then at the same time, you know, they're using these weapons, and I know, you know, these countries don't have the resources to create such weapons, so they're obviously getting those weapons from the white supremacists. The white supremacists giving them those weapons so that they can kill each other. So when he says racists do not approve of any fights or arguments between non-white people, that non-white people settle among themselves, without the so-called help of racists. That whole war was just something that lit up to me, and really put into context what he means when he says we need to stop squabbling amongst ourselves and asking racists to settle it. I think that's a major, example, but there's definitely smaller ones, but that's just one in particular.
Yeah, just I do believe a lot of victims could have been would still be alive if they were not in some sort of like victim squabble and the race soldier needed to be called and then someone ended up getting killed, or some name calling occurred and a fight occurred and someone ended up getting killed. So
It, it's important to note that oftentimes they're behind some of the squabbling. I want to point out a situation that I remember when I was a part of the, it was, the attempt at forwallism. It's called the National Alliance of Black Panthers. And right around the time that that the Katrina situation happened, one of the members, she wanted to, she started a food drive at a local school. She spoke with the principal, who was a racist suspect, and the principal told her, "Yeah, sure, great idea. We'll reserve a room." She gave her a classroom that no one was using to put all the food in, and all of the children in the school and their attempted parents, they donated. So she had like so much food that she needed to get a U-Haul truck to get all to load up all of the food. So the principal told her, "Hey, look, I'm going to need this classroom back, so you're going to have to get all this food out." So the victim left to go get a U-Haul truck, and it took her, I guess it took her all day, but by the time she came back with the U-Haul truck, all of the food and everything was gone. And the principal, the racist suspect principal, told the victim that the enforcement officials came by and took all of the food. And she gave a specific name of another victim who was an enforcement official. And this victim happened to go to that same school. They attended school together. The victim that was the enforcement official and the one that was the National Alliance of Black Panthers. They attended school together. So this principal knew this. And the victim, when she got upset, she called me, raising hell, saying that the police had stolen all the food and everything. And so I called the principal, and she explained to me that the enforcement official volunteered to take the stuff. So when I spoke to the enforcement official, she told me that the principal had called her and told her about it. She didn't even know anything about the food being there until the principal called her. So it was like the principal was, this racist suspect had attempted to cause, well, she succeeded in causing a conflict between these two individuals, these two victims that knew each other growing up, and tried to make it look like it was the police going after the National Alliance of Black Panthers instead of these two individuals. Does you guys see what I'm saying?
wow, she literally like would just using it seems like she was using the victim as pawns to get some sort of satisfaction, some sort of to have fun.
Right. Right. She caused the conflict. And if right around that time was when I first started reading the code, and that's why I was able to easily see what was going on. And so I was able to solve the matter by, getting both victims on the phone and telling them what happened. But it was getting ready to be a super conflict because she was trying to tell us that the police had took all the stuff and they're trying to stop me from getting this stuff to the people in Katrina, all this kind of stuff like that, when it was really just that one principal, that racist suspect, that was causing everything.
Kudos for you, Dr. Singh, for putting them together.
Oh yes, sir, brother. I was just trying to do what I thought was best to do, to stop two victims from having some mess unnecessarily.
All righty.
Thank you.
Was someone gonna make a comment? Okay, so this is gonna...
Yeah, I'd like to tell you about a different situation. I was in a job years ago. This is a situation how you can get white people to convince non-white people to solve their own problems. This was eye-opening for me. Now, on this job, I've already gone through the constitutional thing, several times. So everybody was aware, the white people were aware of what was going to happen if they didn't step in and straighten situations out. So there was this guy from India, dark-skinned guy, just like me, dark-skinned. And he was a manager over one sphere of activity. I was a manager over another sphere of activity. But we had to work together because what I was managing was the governance and policies and procedures and processes, et cetera, that guided his actions, the guy from India, to produce the products that he had been assigned to produce. And we were always back and forth. Where he didn't want to do this or didn't want to do that. And one day it got pretty heated, and he reached out to the the guy that was over the technical aspects of the whole contract, Department of Defense contract. He reached out to him, talking about me, I suppose. I don't know. I don't know what that conversation was about. And so that guy that was over the technical aspects, white person, racist suspect, and I say that because, I had labeled him that at that particular time, after going through, the constitutional meetings with him. And so he reached out to both of us and he said, hey, I'm going to need you guys to get your heads together and solve this problem. So immediately, and he sent us an email stating that. And so immediately, the guy from India called me up and had a complete behavioral change. He was nice, he was courteous, all because a white person said to be. That was like really eye-opening for me. That generally it might take that for some non-white people, just for white people to say, you know, do this, do that, and do it in a courteous manner, and do it in, you know, none of that was in the email. He just said, you got to put your heads together and solve the problem. But that changed this guy's whole behavior about how he interacted with me in order to get the problem solved. And we got the problem solved, you know. But that's something that I don't think many non-white people actually experience or know that they experience in their lifetime. That sometimes the reason that non-white people are so courteous, especially on the job, like in this job situation, is because a white person has directed them to be. You know, and you never know what's going on behind the scenes. You just know all of a sudden, you know, there's no conflict between the non-white people. And you hardly ever know why. I don't think, you know, a lot of people even know why or even want to know why. They just, you know, push forward and try to get the problem solved. So that was an interesting experience for me.
Yeah, I think that's, wow. White power. So I think that's a great segue into reading this last portion. From 259, stop squabbling among yourselves and asking the racist white supremacists to settle it. The racists want non-white people to continue to be their subjects and victims. While using non-white people as victims, the racists particularly want the non-white people to squabble among themselves and then beg them, the racists, to settle the squabbles. This is one of the major ways that racists have of maintaining their power. They also do this to prove their power, feed their egos, and amuse themselves. They do this for fun, glory, and or material comfort. And then, actually, I'm going to read on the rest of it because it's pretty significant as well. Racists do not approve of any fights or arguments between non-white people that non-white people settle among themselves without the so-called help of racists. Racists do not knowingly allow any non-white person to do anything that does not directly or indirectly help to promote racism. White supremacy. Racists approve of and entice non-white people to fight each other, to kill each other, to squabble with each other, to name call each other, and or to do anything that best helps non-white people to remain confused and non-constructive. So I think this is where we're at right now. We're in this state, the non-white collective, particularly the non-white collective is very much a confused and non-constructive collective. I think that is an easier truth to swallow than being called silly, pitiful, primitive, and or stupid, even though those are also pretty correct terms to describe the behavior patterns that we can see ourselves partaking in. But yeah, very important to practice the 10 stops, to attempt to practice, to practice the 10 stops if we want to do some serious damage to the system of racism, white supremacy. So I think we could get into closing comments before we have our guest. Anyone like to start? Try to make them concise.
I can start. Just to close out some of the things that I will be thinking about as I continue to read is honestly coming up with solutions and almost changing my mind to continuously be solution based, especially talking to others. One of the things, especially talking to others like non-white and white people, but one of the things I always think about is Neely Fuller again, who says that when you're talking to white people about racism, you can almost doze off and wake back up and say, what are you going to do about it? It kind of just, I don't know why I don't see chuckle, but it makes me think of like all the opportunities that I can just say that and just become like more solution based, like start saying, hey, this could be a solution. But think of solutions as if like what would be like logical to do, and also remember that silence is okay. So if I don't have an answer, especially in conversations with racist suspects, just don't say anything, kind of just okay, you know. And then also just continuously be constructive, especially when I am like working and talking or speaking about the problem, and try to be concise as possible and clear. Thank you.
Thank you. This was section defending people relations. Definitely a good tool if one is really wanting to change their experiences when engaging with other people, whether white or non-white, and also for those who are wanting to improve their relationships with all people. I believe this is really good resource for that. Yeah, very constructive.
My closing comments is for people activity, as much as to myself, it taught me how to conduct myself with non-whites and whites, due to the fact that I don't know how to be or act a way towards towards white people. So now it puts a code that I can follow to be or say when it comes to white people and non-white people. I learned that asking questions is important, and not to glorify the struggles that we have, but to always be consistent and try to always be on code the way that you can and be on code, because everybody's on code in different ways. But to follow the guidelines of, snitching, not cursing, not gossiping, it just brings a broader idea that you have to stay in this, and it's gonna be times where you're weary, but always try to be consistent on what you're doing, because it's a us problem instead of a you problem.
For me, my closing comments are Area 6, politics, people relations. Sometimes I wish Neely Fuller didn't have to go in order or alphabetical order. So a lot of this would have been helpful. When you're excited about counter racism and speaking about it, I would have saved myself a lot of time and energy not getting into arguments. But that's my fault, nobody else's. So this has been definitely very helpful, and interacting with people, especially victims and I guess white people as well. So thank you for that, Neely Fuller. That's it for my closing comment.
I'll go. And then as far as my closing comments for Area 6 people relations, on the one part about someone's method working, I would go back to the one thing I had mentioned, like whether you like other victims or not, if it's a victim that's attempting to, dedicate time and energy to solving this problem in whatever way they think is correct, just share constructive information with them, because there's no point in just being like, I'm going to hoard all this information I've discovered on the system, because that is probably how this problem has been going on for as long as it has. So hopefully in my time participating here, I have provided constructive information to everyone here. And that's what I got for area 6. And I'm looking forward to the next area, number 7, religion.
Thank you for the check-ins, everyone. I believe that is everyone who's going to give one. So